Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Thursday, December the 18th, 2025. Today I thought it might be a good idea to have an update on Donald Trump in the light of what is going on in Venezuela. So it seems that the US has a blockade of Venezuela. It's sort of over the last sort of few months, it's been sort of attacking boats, claiming that they were shipping drugs. It's just sort of seized an oil tanker, and certainly things seem to be hotting up in the region. So yes, I want to look at Trump's chart. I also want to look at the horoscope of Venezuela, and just see what is happening astrologically, in that region. But before I do that, I want to consider the astrology and the I Ching for today, which is Thursday, December the 18th, 2025. And don't forget to like and subscribe if appropriate. So here is the chart for today, set for noon, New York time, on Thursday, December the 18th. So we can see that the moon is in Sagittarius, and it's quite clearly in this sign. It doesn't matter what your time zone is. That's where the moon is, and we've also got four planets in Sagittarius: Mercury, Moon, Venus, and the Sun. So with both the Sun and the Moon in Sagittarius, that does mean that we're approaching the new moon. And Friday, tomorrow, I think the new moon is exact, so we've got a new moon right at the end of Sagittarius. So the moon is telling us that the cycle is nearly over, that the moon is waning, is deeply waning, and so perhaps it's time to just tidy things up as we move towards the end of a week, as we move towards the end of a lunar cycle. And of course, with a new lunar cycle, that will bring challenges, but also opportunities. And in my video for tomorrow, I will be looking at the Sagittarius new moon in some detail. Now, the moon does make a conjunction to Mercury, so that's the lunar aspect of the day. And so the Moon Mercury conjunction in conjunction in Sagittarius is quite a fun aspect. I mean, Moon and Mercury, as I like to say, are both planets connected with communication. Moon is more about how we communicate emotionally and spontaneously. Mercury is more about how we get our brain into gear. It's more intellectual communication. But when the moon and Mercury are making a conjunction, it may be more easy than usual to express our feelings, to tell people what's on our mind. Perhaps too easy. Sometimes we might say something and straight away regret it. And this possibility is emphasized by the fact that Mercury is making a sesquiquadrate to Jupiter. So there's Mercury, there's Jupiter. So they are making an 135-degree aspect. So when Mercury and Jupiter, Mercury in Sagittarius, Jupiter in Cancer, when they are making a sesquiquadrate aspect, we might think of excess, maybe saying too much. We don't know when to stop talking. Could also be about thinking. And Mercury is a planet of thought, so with Mercury making a sesquiquadrate to Jupiter, there might be, a lot to say. And aside from that, we've got a couple of planets, a couple of aspects involving Pluto. We've got a decile between the Sun and Pluto, and a semisextile between Mars and Pluto. So decile between the Sun and Pluto. So what does that mean? That means that the Sun and Pluto are 36 degrees apart. 36 degrees, that sounds obscure, but 36 degrees is 1/10 of the circle. So that is a kind of a 5 series aspect. To be technical about it, it's an opposition on the fifth harmonic. And the fifth harmonic is about what we are trying to create. And if you've got an opposition on the fifth harmonic, that could be about the struggle to create. And so what are we trying to do with Sun, Decal, Pluto? We are struggling to make an impression. We are perhaps struggling to transform. May not be easy, but we know that there is a way that we can use our willpower to create the changes that we feel are necessary. Also, we got Mars semi-sextile Pluto. So we got Mars in Capricorn, sextile Pluto in Aquarius. So if you've got Mars semi-sextile Pluto, these two planets are kind of struggling with each other. On one hand, we're trying to get things done, Mars in Capricorn, and some of us may be quite straightforward about it. Let's just get on with it. We've got a set of targets to go through. We're trying to accomplish our plans, and let's do it one step at a time. That's Mars in Capricorn. Can be very sensible placement for Mars, but it's semi-sextile Pluto. Pluto might have other ideas. It's not quite enough to do it the usual way. If we want to have an impact, we have to also be an individual. It's not enough just to do what we're told or do what's expected of us. We have to use our energy in a way that is very original. And that could be a struggle, but it is possible. So that's the picture in set for New York. There's one other aspect that possibly needs to be considered, and we've just had the Sun making a semi-square. Sorry, the Sun making a square to Saturn. In fact, the Sun is still square Saturn. I've been talking about that Sun square Saturn for the last couple of days, and it might feel that it's just difficult to get things done. Everything is difficult with Sun square Saturn. Everything might be an effort, and then there's the Sun square Neptune coming up. Pretty much right upon us in Sun square Neptune. It's kind of, again, we want to be ourselves. We want to express ourselves. Sun in Sagittarius, but Neptune in Pisces is kind of in our way. Things just become chaotic. They become diffuse, and we can't concentrate, and we can't focus on particular targets. And so what we have today is that the Sun is, on the Saturn-Neptune midpoint. It's square the Saturn-Neptune midpoint. So Sun in Sagittarius certainly has lots of ideas and lots of spark, but when it comes to seeing things through, it might be difficult. We might get distracted. We might become afraid. We might not know what we're doing. We might be deceived. So it's very important that we are very decisive. We have to be clear about what we are trying to achieve, and we have to be aware of all the things which might try to pull us off the path. And it's not necessarily the case that we will be deceived, that we will end up getting nothing done, but we just have to consider that it might be a possibility. And if it is a possibility, we must ask ourselves why. And perhaps we're making things too complicated. Perhaps we're being over-emotional. And, we have to sort of clear away the clouds. And, that's what Sagittarius has to do, Sun in Sagittarius. Get through the mess and see and understand the underlying picture. So, so that's New York. And turning to Sydney, Australia, not a great deal of difference between the two charts, and certainly from a sign perspective. The moon is still in Sagittarius, early Sagittarius. Moon is still making a conjunction to Mercury. So if you are in Australia or New Zealand, I don't think things are going to be so different than if you're in the Americas. Certainly from a sign perspective. So that's the geocentric picture. And then from a heliocentric view, don't forget we are putting the sun at the center of the solar system. So here is the chart. Mercury is in heliocentric Libra, moving towards an opposition of Chiron. Mercury opposition Chiron. That might be what we are trying to say. Maybe not what we are trying to say, what someone is trying to say. And Mercury opposition Chiron, there is an urgency there. We have to be different. We want to try to be different. We don't necessarily want to follow the crowd. And nonetheless, it is an opposition. And so something might be holding us back. And that might be the wound. We would feel very wounded if there's something we wanted to say, but we couldn't say it. And it would be frustrating. And if we feel frustrated with them, we might feel we have to sort of escalate and do something that really does grab everyone's attention. So yeah, that is a way in which one could see this opposition between Mercury and Chiron. I don't think there's anything else to report of any huge significance, so I think that I will now turn to the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Thursday, December the 18th, 2025. Aries, things are happening. In the recent past, I thought that there might have been times when it might have been, somewhat difficult to get things done. There were obstacles, sort of external obstacles, but also inner obstacles. Perhaps there was your reluctance, perhaps, to get involved, and you might also, at times, have been in a situation where your emotions might have been just a bit too strong, and you might have been ever so slightly oversensitive. But I don't think right now that's something you need to worry about. The moon is now in Sagittarius. We've got 4 planets in Sagittarius, and so that does allow you to move beyond your immediate environment, not to be sort of caught up in trivial concerns that honestly you shouldn't really be worrying about. And if you look at the chart, from an Aries perspective, a lot of the planets are up in the air. So if you could say that the top of the chart represents Libra, Scorpio, Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces, and the bottom of the chart of the other signs. And so, you've got those 4 planets in Sagittarius, and that Mars in Capricorn, they are at the top of the chart. And because there's an emphasis at the top of the chart, remember this is a chart of the signs with Aries put on the left, with all those with all those planets at the top, that does indicate that it is about you projecting yourself outwards. It's not a time to be hiding or keeping things secret. There is a lot to be expressed, and there's also a lot to try to understand. You don't have all the answers, and if you can just move into sort of different places, move beyond the next hill. Don't be restricted by the next hill. What lies beyond that hill. You don't know until you actually climb that hill, and you might then see that there are sort of new and interesting possibilities that they could certainly sort of move you on and could be really elevating. It's important to be elevated if you're an Aries. You don't want to be stuck in one place, and you might be thinking about ways in which you can indeed expand your horizons. So that might be the case with some Arians are thinking about travel. Quite a few Arians like the concept of traveling, not being tied to one place, can just sort of jet off to the other side of the world at the drop of a hat. But you do have to be careful. I mean, you have to remember that travel. Travel. Well, a little bit of travel can narrow the mind, can't it? I mean, I think that is the case, isn't it? I mean, if you go to a place and you spend a couple of days there, and it can just conform to it can just reinforce your stereotypes, reinforce your impressions. You went to this place, you had an idea about this place, you went there for a few days, and your ideas were confirmed. I mean, that can be the way it goes. I mean, I think as a rule of thumb, if you're going to another country, you should always make sure that you spend 100 times more time than actually in the country than what you spend traveling. So if it takes you a day to travel to another country, make sure you spend 100 days in that country, because otherwise that's just it doesn't make sense, does it? Besides, you've got to think about the environment anyway. I'm just spouting here. I'm a sort of a bit of a sort of eco-fascist in some respects. I mean, that's the only way in which I'm sort of extreme. I mean, we've all got to have our opinions. I mean, not that you care about my opinions, but I'm just feel I have to say that. I sort of feel a moral obligation when I talk about travel, because I think that my concern is that I don't want to do anything that encourages another person to do anything to destroy the planet, to melt the ice caps. So I feel I have to say that. But nonetheless, whatever I say, it doesn't really matter. Travel, going to different places, is going to be important, and there are many ways of going to different places. You don't have to physically go there. You can go there spiritually, and different places at the highest level is not about getting a plane ticket. I mean, there are many ways. I mean, astral travel, for example. I mean, it's a wonderful fantasy, astral travel. I mean, this idea of you just sort of go to sleep, and then you're conscious, and you're conscious, and somehow you're able to just move around in spirit. Okay, maybe not astral travel. Maybe that's just a step too far. But you can certainly be elevated spiritually. So if you're watching this video and you're into astrology, then it's quite likely that you are quite a spiritual person. And so maybe with all these planets in Sagittarius, you do have a chance to really explore your spirituality and just move on to something new and exciting. But I don't think you're going to completely forget your material needs. I mean, just as a reminder, Mars is still in Capricorn, and Capricorn is quite a materialistic sign. Mars is exalted in Capricorn. And from your perspective, Mars in Capricorn just is about you thinking about what you need to achieve, what would you like to achieve. And yeah, it's great to be spiritual and to be inspirational, but there's still the material world to consider. And on the material plane, you can be very effective. And yeah, Mars does make a semi-sextile to Pluto, and this semi-sextile to Pluto maybe indicates that there's something about the way you are that can be quite transformational. But it won't necessarily be easy, because it's a semi-sextile. Semi-sextile is a 30-degree aspect, and so Mars and Pluto are challenging each other. So you want to be able to assert yourself, Mars in Capricorn, in a way that is systematic, has a particular goal, moving solidly forward. But then Pluto is saying, is that quite good enough? Maybe you have to take things further. And so the transformational energy of Pluto might be challenging, but I think it's challenging in a good sense. And if you can integrate Pluto, then I think Aries, you can be really very, very effective today. So overall, Aries, there's a lot going on, and some of the stuff going on does seem to be at odds with each other. You've got, on one hand, you've got concepts of travel, whether it's physical travel, spiritual travel, elevating yourself. On the other hand, yeah, you are ambitious. You want to achieve things in the real world, and I think that you can do both. So yeah, so it looks as if it could be a very productive and multifaceted day. Taurus. There may be moments, Taurus, where things do seem a little bit complicated. I mean, you cannot expect everything to be just completely straightforward. I mean, you'd like things to be straightforward. I mean, you are a Taurus, and Taurus, is a sign that it's an earth sign, and it wants to know where it stands in the world in relation to other people, and you don't want too many complications. But I think there could be complications, and you might find that things are just a little more complicated than you'd realized or you'd expected. And if you want to understand something, you have to look under the surface, and you have to spend time on it. You have to spend time thinking and feeling it, and you shouldn't necessarily take other people's answers at face value. People can say all sorts of things. It's easy. They just say one thing, they say another thing. It's just the words just come out. But can you entirely trust them? Well, they may not be deliberately devious, but people can use signals, and people can make assumptions about other people, that other people are perceptive, that people can understand their subtle signals. And you as a Taurus, you actually can be very unsubtle. You just look at things at face value, and you just don't look at the nuances underneath it all. So that's kind of what you got to do, Taurus. Particularly in a social situation, you should not take what people say at face value, and instead you should ask yourself, well, what do they really mean? What might their underlying motivations be? And that I think is the right approach. Try to move beyond the material. I mean, the material is important, but it's not the whole story. And as far as people are concerned, other people are concerned, what's going on in a social sense, there does seem to be a lot of activity. A lot of activity and a lot of energy. People with high energy people may be just appearing from nowhere. They may be wanting your attention. They may seem to be very dynamic, perhaps too dynamic, unless you're able to give as good as you get. I think that if you are in a high energy situation, you've got to be as dynamic as the people around you. If you're not dynamic and you don't assert yourself, well, then you could just be sidelined or steamrollered or whatever. So do make an effort to be assertive, to make your opinions very clear straight away. Because if you don't make your opinions clear, if you give the impression that you're neutral, but you don't care, then your opinions could be ignored. And I don't think, Taurus, that's what you want. And it would all be very unnecessary, because if you try hard, then you can be dynamic, and you can certainly get everyone's attention in a fortunate way. So perhaps it's a situation where you're able to tune into your power, your emotional power. Once you're able to do that, then I think Taurus, you can actually have quite a powerful impact. Gemini. Moon is now in Sagittarius, very much in Sagittarius, and it's making a conjunction to Mercury. So, Mercury is your ruler. We've got a Moon Mercury conjunction in your opposite sign. And, I would regard that conjunction as perhaps being quite useful. It does mean that when you're dealing with other people, that you can really respond pretty well. I think that you can respond, fairly spontaneously, and you're not going to have to spend sort of ages working out what to say. You can just say the first thing that comes to mind, and very often the first thing that comes to mind is going to be absolutely right, absolutely appropriate, and when we talk about the first thing that comes to mind, it's important not to think too much in sort of any particular social situation. I mean, thinking too much can be deadly, certainly from a social perspective. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think I've sort of mentioned this story before, but sort of years ago in the 80s, I remember I was doing this course in counselling. I don't know why I was doing this course. I thought it'd be a good thing to do. And there was this terrible exercise, and the exercise was that you had to turn to the person on your left and pay them a compliment. I mean, it was dreadful. I mean, really dreadful. Because, you see, the problem with that exercise is that you've got about 1 second to pay that person on your left a compliment. You've got 1 second. And if you spend 2 seconds or 3 seconds, you've blown it. And it becomes a disaster. It looks as if you can't pay that other person a compliment. And I just froze, completely froze. I mean, I'm not the sort of person that just pays people random compliments. That's just not me. And, I did not have that spontaneity. Gemini was sort of analysing it and thinking it, well, what am I going to say? And, by the time I thought it through, well, forget it, I've blown it. So as far as this Moon-Mercury conjunction is concerned in Sagittarius, it is quite spontaneous. And the key thing is not to think about it too much. Moon and Mercury in Sagittarius, it's a fire sign, but not in an air sign. And, okay, that can be a challenge for the average Gemini. Especially now there are no planets in air signs except for Pluto. So it's important to be spontaneous. Fire signs are all about something happening immediately, not waiting a couple of seconds. So use that Moon-Mercury conjunction, use the spontaneity of it. And I think you're going to be able to respond very well to other people, and don't analyze it. There's no need to analyze it. Analysis is not going to work too well today with no planets in air signs. And so tune into something else, And when I say tune into something else, get into the fire of the day. And even if you can be fiery, make connections, not have to analyze things, be as fast as possible. And the first thing that comes to mind from nowhere is probably going to be the right thing, and that means that just know that you're getting it right, and just don't think about it too much. That would not necessarily be a good idea. And then we have to think about what are you thinking about, and what are you talking about? And Geminis can talk about many different things. They can talk about every subject under the sun. And some of the things you're thinking about and talking about may actually be quite difficult. I mean, maybe quite difficult for other people. Not everyone has your set of interests, and Geminis have wide interests, and they're able to often deal with things that other people don't want to touch, because Geminis just have this intellectual interest. They can be interested in something that is beyond the pale, just in an academic sense. It doesn't mean anything, but not everyone shares that approach, and so some of your ideas could be, ever so slightly distressing. I mean, not distressing to you, but distressing to other people if you bring them up. And also, we do have a sesquiquadrate between Mercury and Jupiter. And so with Mercury-Jupiter sesquiquadrate, I mean, it may be that that's a fortunate aspect. I mean, Mercury is 135 degrees from Jupiter. Jupiter is a planet of expansion. So maybe there's a lot you want to talk about, and maybe there's a lot you can talk about. So there is a positive way of looking at it, but then Mercury sesquiquadrate Jupiter may take something too far, may try to explain things too much. And as I said, today's not a day for explanation, not really. And additionally, Mercury sesquiquadrate Jupiter might well say something about relationships. Jupiter could be another person, and how do you and any other person relate to one another? Well, there's a sesquiquadrate, and I'm thinking more perhaps of one-to-one relationships. So one-to-one relationships, it just could be with Mercury sesquiquadrate Jupiter. There's just a feeling that there's a temporary mismatch, at least. You and the other person are perhaps going in different directions, and maybe have different priorities, and it needn't be a problem. And I think that going back what I was saying with a Moon Mercury conjunction, with that Moon Mercury conjunction, you don't have to be the one who is always presenting new material. You can respond, and I think that you're going to be able to respond very well. So perhaps you should let other people take the verbal initiative, and then you can respond quickly. You don't have to say anything substantial. You don't have to say anything that's at all meaningful. You just have to say something that is just spontaneous, and then that is going to be the right thing to do, and that should ensure that from a social perspective the day runs fairly smoothly. Cancer. Like yesterday, Cancer, there could well be things that just need to be dealt with. That's all that might, really, maybe that's all there is to be said. Nothing is perfect. Things could always be better, and while you're at it, you might as well seek some kind of improvement. Especially if something had been bothering you recently, and you thought it was a bit of a mess. It might be fairly disorganized, and just now might be the time to just get everything together and make sure that nothing is left to chance. And I think that's also a good thing to remember. You don't have to leave things to chance. So if you want to prepare for something, maybe you've got something you've got to do in the not so distant future, and if you spend today preparing, then I think that might be a really good idea. And you don't forget, Cancer, that it is the run up to a new moon. I mean, the sun and the moon are in the same sign. I think you can feel it. I think you can feel that something is coming to an end. The lunar cycle is coming to an end, and there's going to be, I think, the new moon is tomorrow. I think it's on the 19th, isn't it? It's sort of 28 Sagittarius. So that new moon is very much going to be something something that represents an ending, but it also represents a beginning. And so perhaps there's nothing that you actually have to initiate today. Because if you initiate something, well, you want to initiate something at the beginning of a new cycle. You don't want to initiate something at the end of an old cycle. So, if you can just tie things up, and if something hasn't been done properly, you can just make sure that it's all in order. And I don't think that should be too much of a problem. And And that's probably it, Cancer. If you feel that something needs to be done better, if you're not happy about something, then you can make changes. And don't forget your own body. With 4 planets in Sagittarius, I think from a Cancerian perspective, the sign Sagittarius, often is connected with the body and with your health and your well-being. And deep down, Cancer, you know what is needed. You just have an intuition about your own health. Now, I'm not recommending that you be your own doctor, that you try to diagnose anything, that you ignore medical advice, that you try to self-medicate or anything like that. I'm not indicating that. I'm just saying that just you have a good understanding of your body, what might be upsetting your equilibrium. I'm not saying anything is upsetting your equilibrium, but you just have an understanding of what works, what doesn't work, what you should and shouldn't be doing. And if you have that kind of feeling, then probably you should go with it. So if you want to make any changes to sort of diet or exercise or your lifestyle, or what you're breathing in, staying away from unhealthy atmospheres, then I think you're going to be able to do it very easily and very, very spontaneously. You'll just know what's good for you, and that I think can guide you. But don't forget, if we're dealing with anything really important, medical condition, of course you've got to seek medical advice, and you can't just self-diagnose and just assume that you know what's good for you. But in a general sense, I think that you do know how to look after yourself. Leo, your mind is going in sort of different places. It's not satisfied to just be thinking about one thing. You're quite into variety, as much variety as possible, and so that's kind of good. I mean, sometimes Leo can be rather stuck in its way. It sort of thinks it knows the answers. It doesn't necessarily know the answers, or it could come up with better answers if it had enough support and enough enthusiasm, and that can come from the outside world. It can come from other people's reaction to you. So don't feel you have to restrict yourself. And sometimes you come across ideas which might be disturbing. They might even feel a bit threatening, but nonetheless they might be absolutely right for you. Yet you are somewhat worried at the moment, and I think the reason you might be worried, or you might be just unsure of yourself, is because we just had the Sun making a square to Saturn, and very soon we're going to have the Sun making a square to Neptune. So we're kind of halfway between those two aspects. So the Sun right now is making a square to the Saturn-Neptune midpoint, and with Sun making that square, it could well be about uncertainty. You just not being sure about where it's all going to end up. And that might mean that at some level, you're quite nervous. You just don't know. And if you're in that state of mind, you might be tempted to do nothing. Why take the risk? But you have to ask yourself, what's the worst that can happen? Think about your fears, and if you really look at your fears, some of your fears might be unreasonable. And even if a worst case scenario happened, how bad would it be? Probably in most cases not too bad at all. So do make the most of the fact that we've got 4 planets in Sagittarius. We're not going to have 4 planets in Sagittarius for much longer. The Sun is getting ready to change sign. It's getting ready to move into Capricorn. After all, the winter solstice in the northern hemisphere is upon us, of course. Is that the summer solstice in the southern hemisphere? So we've got this sign change coming, involving the sun, your ruler. And I would really suggest that over the next couple of days, you just take advantage of it. The fact that there are all these planets in Sagittarius, and in fact, you've got a new moon coming up in Sagittarius. Tomorrow there's a new moon, and it being in Sagittarius, that can represent a sort of a new beginning to you. For you. When is that? Just have a look. When is that new moon? Yeah, the new moon is. It is tomorrow. It might be the day after if you're not in the Americas. I make it that the new moon is on December the 20th. December the 20th is, December the 20th is a Saturday at 1:43 a.m. London time. So that means that it is tomorrow if you're in the if you're in the Americas. So that is a change for you, and I think that it is fortunate, and so you shouldn't be worried about it. So I think Leo, being confident is important, and also being aware that you don't have to take things as they stand. If there's something that you don't like, that you feel it could be better, you feel that it could in some way be transformed, then you can take action. And the reason is, the sun, your ruler, is making a 36-degree aspect to Pluto, and it's a 36 degrees, 1/10 of the circle. And that is what you're trying to get together, Leo. And some Leos are, with their conscious mind, trying to create change, trying to create transformative change. And I think, Leo, if you make the effort, that's something that you can do. Virgo. Mercury is making a sesquiquadrate to Jupiter. It sounds an obscure aspect, pretty a minor aspect, but it's 135 degrees. I'm into 135-degree aspects. 135 degrees is 3/8 of the circle. So with Mercury sesquiquadrate Jupiter, you may feel that you want to take something further, ideally, that you're not entirely happy with the way things are, and you're just being challenged to move something to a new level. And Virgo, that might not be a situation that you're entirely happy with. Virgos often like to do things in a systematic way, and so having to deal with sort of a blast of drama, having to create change, having to move things further than you really wanted, that might be difficult for you. So what is the best approach? And I think the best approach is to not have fixed ideas with Mercury sesquiquadrate Jupiter. And this Mercury sesquiquadrate Jupiter may well say something about relationships and how you get on with people. Now, there is a way of looking at this aspect and suggests that you and other people, particularly in a one-to-one setting, just might not be able to relate too well to one another. There could be, the occasional clash, you and another person having different priorities. You're not entirely on the same wavelength. And that is something that, perhaps it's inevitable. You can't be on the same wavelength all the time. Even with people you really care about, there will be times when you just have differences of opinion, and maybe those differences of opinion should just be accepted, and just leave it at that. So relationships are not necessarily compulsory today. And if you have your doubts, then maybe you should be thinking about something else. You should be thinking perhaps about, what is important to you, especially with four planets in Sagittarius, including Mercury. And, Sagittarius might seem to be a very extroverted, out there kind of sign, but not necessarily in the Virgo horoscope. In the Virgo horoscope, Sagittarius is the sign which is right at the bottom of the chart, and Sagittarius can be a sign which is linked with security in your home life, in your family, and so that might be something that you really want to focus on, and you're not necessarily looking for too much variety. I mean, too much variety can be exhausting. It's better that you're just comfortable where you are, especially as we've got a run up to the new moon. So we've got a new moon, Friday, Saturday coming up, and this new moon is a new beginning. New moon is in Sagittarius. So with a new moon in Sagittarius, this might be a time, Virgo, when you want to start to reevaluate your home and your family, look at what's going on in your domestic scene perhaps in a new way. But I don't want to talk too much about the new moon right now, because that's something I can talk about on Friday, and I'll probably talk about it on tomorrow in my video for Friday. But it's happening. The new moon is about to be exact. So the moon is waning, and with this new moon, you might have ideas about how you're living, where you're living, what security means, how you relate to your family. But I'll be talking about all of that in my video, probably in my video for tomorrow. Libra. Like yesterday, Libra, you are able to, talk about most things. I think that you are very communicative, and you can communicate with power and conviction, and there'll be sort of nothing mediocre about the way you come across, nothing undefined. You could, if you really wanted to, be undefined. If you're really, really the kind of Libra that always wants to sit on the fence, but I don't think you are. I think that you're looking for an approach which is very definite, and I think that the more definite you can be, I think the more appreciated you'll be. I mean, appreciation does matter, and you want to be listened to. And if you just are completely non-committal and you just come up with a stream of pleasantries, then what can you expect? I mean, that's it's all very nice. It's all very boring as well, and no one is really going to be too impressed by that. So you should, as far as is possible, Libra, be absolutely definite about what you believe in and what is important to you. And in the process, you might want to be a bit judgmental. There's nothing wrong with being judgmental. Sometimes it's necessary. If something offends you, if you feel that someone has done something wrong, or there's some injustice out there, you're a Libran. I mean, you regard justice as important. You're very aware of the concept of injustice, and this might well be reflected in in what you say and what excites you. And so Libra, be as definite as possible, because if you are sitting on the fence, I don't think anyone is going to take you seriously. But don't worry. I think you do seem to know how to behave, and when dealing with other people, when you're in their company, you can come over quite strongly. I mean, not too strongly, but you can just come over as being a very definite person, and I think that is going to be greatly appreciated. So overall, Libra, I think that things are looking pretty good. You know how to behave. You know that it's important to be dynamic. You do not have to be just stuck in one place. With 4 planets in Sagittarius, how can you be stuck in one place? There might be something about you, but you hover, you move in one, you hover in one place. Maybe rather like a hover, like a hoverfly, or I don't know, some sort of insect. You hover one place, you get what you can. Maybe it's like a bee landing on a flower, taking the nectar, but you don't hang around. You keep moving. And I think if you can take that approach, just not be stuck in one place, but you need to have as much variety as possible. And so, if you can have several places over the course of a day that you visit, you never stay in one place for too long. I think that is the right approach. You don't want to spoil people. So you might spoil people by just giving them too much of yourself. To give them just a little bit of yourself, just enough to get their interest, and then you can move on. And that might be a good way of building up your social connections and making sure that you're always in demand. Scorpio. Mars is making a semi-sextile to Pluto. I mean, it's one of the things going on today, but from a Scorpio perspective, maybe it's the most important thing. I mean, Mars is in Capricorn. It's making a semi-sextile to Pluto in Aquarius, and it just could be that you're thinking about the concept of power. How do you find your power? What is that power about? And it perhaps links to the fact that Pluto went into Aquarius a few years ago. It's now in Aquarius. It's not going to leave Aquarius for a few decades, and so you're acclimatizing to Pluto in Aquarius still. And with Mars semi-sextile Pluto, it may occur to you that it's not necessarily quite as easy as you'd thought. Pluto in Aquarius wants your attention, and Pluto in Aquarius is perhaps telling you that you've got something to think about and something that you need to be aware of. It may be connected with your own history, with whatever you've inherited, sort of from a historic, familial, even genetic level. It sort of kind of goes distant. It goes back to the past. And so, there might be Mars in Capricorn. You're trying to make sense of things. You're doing a good job making sense of things, I hope, because Mars is in Capricorn. Mars is exalted in Capricorn. You, Scorpio, are exalted because Mars is in Capricorn. That's all well and good. But then you come up against a semi-sextile with Pluto, and you just have to integrate something new, or maybe old, maybe something to do with your past. And it may be difficult because you're dealing with something that you're not necessarily 100% comfortable with. But if you're uncomfortable with something, that is perhaps a good sign. It's a sign that you're on the right track. And if you're comfortable with something, well, how can it do you any good? There needs to be some challenge there. So that Mars semi-sextile Pluto is perhaps giving you an idea about, what you need, Scorpio, to really to be able to sort of tune into your power. And perhaps to tune into your power, you have to have an awareness of who you are, where you have come from. What is your past? Not just your past, maybe your parents' past, your heritage. So if you can do all that, I think that you would be empowering yourself. So don't neglect anything just because it might seem too complicated, too obscure, too distant. But no, everything matters, and today it is the smallest things that could matter the most. And I know that sounds rather complicated, but it shouldn't take away from the fact that you are you're strong. You're in a strong position. You're able to really assert yourself. But in order to assert yourself, you have to be completely integrated. You can't have parts of yourself that you're ignoring, you're neglecting, you're putting to one side. You've got to really be a whole person. Sagittarius, we have got a new moon coming up. I mean, we're in the new moon zone. I mean, the sun and the moon are together in Sagittarius. Tomorrow, maybe Saturday, depends on your time zone. The new moon is exact, and so this new moon is an ending, and it's also a beginning. It's the end of one cycle. You've perhaps been working on something, and there's a limit to how much more you can do. You might be feeling that you're sort of wrapping up on it, and you don't really want to take on anything new because there's no point in taking anything new. But then, no sooner have you finished than you're about to begin, and so do look forward to the new lunar cycle because you've got this new moon in 28 Sagittarius. So that's something that you're really running into. And also, we have 4 planets in Sagittarius. We've got Sun, Venus, Moon, Mercury. So that really makes you strong. That makes you someone who can really stand out. And you can also stand out as someone who is really very talented. I mean, your talents are obvious. So it's important, Sagittarius, that you're not shy. If you can do something, if you can do it well, then I think it's important that everyone gets to know about it. They find out what you can do. They need to find out. You need to tell them. And you don't have to be arrogant. You're not boasting about it. You're just informing people that there's something you can do. You don't even have to necessarily tell them. You just do it by example. And you provide an example of what you can do, and it's quite clear to everyone that you can do it very well. And so, if you carry on in this track, I think that you could be really very, very impressive. And so don't hide anything. I know that the Sun in Sagittarius is making a square to the Saturn-Neptune midpoint because the Sun has just made a square to Saturn. It's about to make a square to Neptune. And because the Sun is in your sign still, there may be moments of doubt where you worry whether or not you're good enough. Are you really good enough? How talented are you? Maybe it doesn't mean anything. Maybe everything's moved on, and what you are good at, no one cares about it. Well, it's not true. Don't allow that Saturn and Neptune to hold you back. Saturn and Neptune, they have their uses. Saturn is quite good as far as structure is concerned. Neptune can perhaps sort of break down barriers, but together Saturn and Neptune could be about fear and self-consciousness, and you just discounting what you're good at. But no, it's not the right approach. I think you have to really be yourself and get noticed. I mean, I think you really can get noticed, but it's not about getting noticed in a way that is obnoxious, making a big scene. I mean, you can be noticed, but you can also respect other people's boundaries and also respect your own boundaries. You don't want to get noticed in such a way that is embarrassing or destroys your boundaries, where you take things too far. But again, that is unnecessary. You just act in a way that is just very natural, and you just demonstrate to everyone what you can do. And I think that if you do that, you'll get a lot of favourable attention. Now, as far as one-to-one relationships are concerned, though, I should mention that Mercury is making a sesquiquadrate to Jupiter. So, of course, Jupiter is your ruler, Mercury is ruler of Gemini, your opposite sign. So you could say that Mercury sesquiquadrate Jupiter might indicate that certain relationships may not always be easy. I mean, a sesquiquadrate is a hard aspect. And so with Mercury sesquiquadrate Jupiter, there could be a certain lack of ease when dealing with some people. And the question is, what is that lack of ease about? Well, it's Mercury sesquiquadrate Jupiter. And while Jupiter has been in Cancer, you have been maybe grappling with certain sort of emotional issues. And all things being equal, Sagittarius is not the most emotional of signs. I mean, you can be emotional, but all things being equal, feeling is not your prime modality, not really. I mean, it's more about sort of intuition, and there's a big difference between feeling and intuition. And so there's a sort of a bit of a mismatch there. And Mercury might mean that Mercury's influence might be that you're rushing, you're jumping to conclusions which you shouldn't necessarily be making. And so have a relaxed approach with other people, and do try to make some effort to respect their sensitivities. And it may work both ways. With Mercury sesquiquadrate Jupiter, you think about Sagittarius as being a somewhat outrageous sign, but you're quite capable of being outraged yourself. Maybe something someone says or does kind of upsets you, even if you know this person very well, you know what they're capable of doing, but it shouldn't upset you. I think you've got to be quite tolerant with this sesquiquadrate between Mercury and Jupiter. Capricorn. There may be quite a lot that you're holding back. Why should you get involved with everything? Yeah, sure, there is a lot going on in the world, but some of it just seems to be just too much, and it might seem tedious. Maybe you've seen it all before, and so why do you want to stick your neck out? And particularly now. I mean, it's the end of the lunar cycle. Okay, we're just about to get a new moon in late Sagittarius, and okay, we've got solstice coming up when the sun moves into Capricorn, but the solstice, we're not there yet. The sun is still in Sagittarius. So given that, why would you want to bother? Why would you want to jump the gun or take action before you understand all the facts? So there is a good reason, Capricorn, for you to hold back, and to feel that you have to commit yourself, that you have to put yourself at the center of things. But that doesn't mean to say that you have to do nothing. You shouldn't forget that Mars is, of course, in your sign. At the beginning of Capricorn, so it's going to be in Capricorn, of course, until the end of January, and it's Mars is great in Capricorn. It's exalted in Capricorn, and so you can really quietly get on with it. You can be very sort of dynamic and purposeful, but in the process, the question is, do you need to draw attention to yourself? I think you could argue you don't need to draw attention to yourself at all. You can just keep moving slowly, being sort of very focused. I mean, you might nonetheless feel that at some stage you need to get rewarded. I mean, the concept of reward might be important, though, because Mars is making a semi-sextile to Pluto. So I don't know what you're doing, but if you have a job, or if you are in a position where there is some kind of financial reward available, or you're not being rewarded enough, Mars semi-sextile Pluto might make you irritated. And this irritation could be a good thing, because the challenge with Mars semi-sextile Pluto is to bring Mars and Pluto together. So Mars in Capricorn is you, working away. Okay, you could say that Saturn is you, but one shouldn't forget that Mars is exalted in Capricorn. So Mars has a strong relationship with your sign. And so with that Mars semi-sextile Pluto, it could be about creating a change that has a financial dimension, not being entirely happy with the way things are, having desires, having maybe monetary desires, and it's okay. There's nothing to be ashamed of, and you can perhaps bring them together, and in the process, make it very clear about what you want. Now, you don't have to make demands like today, but you can have a certainty that you are, for example, worth a certain amount, that you should be rewarded up to a certain level. And I know that the reward is perhaps petty. I mean, from an existential point of view, does it matter? But then existentially, maybe it does matter, because that is how much you are valued. And so perhaps you should think about how you are valued and what you are going to do to make sure that you are sufficiently valued. And that may be how that Mars semi-sextile Pluto works. Aquarius, you're like yesterday, I think, pretty sociable. We do have a run up to a new moon in Sagittarius. So with this new moon in Sagittarius, it might well be about the people friends, for example, perhaps new friends. You don't have to be satisfied with any one particular social scene. If one social scene has outlived itself, then maybe you should move on to something else. And that could be the message of the new moon, because the new moon is with you. It's with us now, because the sun and the moon are in the same sign. And so, this new moon is at 28 Sagittarius. So it's a strange kind of new moon. We've had this run of new moons which are very late in the sign, and this is just another of those new moons late in the sign. And it's almost like an ending and a beginning as well. But maybe you feel that certain people have done what they can, they've done their best, but maybe they can't do much more. And so perhaps, Aquarius, it is time to move on and perhaps seek new social pastures. So I think that would be, a good approach. Additionally, Aquarius, I think at the moment that your freedom really does matter. I mean, freedom always matters to Aquarians, but right now it's particularly important. And if you are being restrained in any way, you feel that your options are being limited, you're going to want to do something about it. You're going to want to show the world who you are, and you perhaps want to reach out for this sort of image of freedom, whatever freedom means to you. So if you do feel that anything's holding you back, that you can't express yourself, then Aquarius, it might be a time when you just have to do something quite dramatic. It doesn't have to be too dramatic. You have to just use as much power as is needed. You don't want to use more power than is needed. Just enough power to ensure that you're able to get things done and to make an impression. And so that means that it could be quite an effective day when you're really able to express yourself really quite powerfully. But it's not just you expressing yourself powerfully, I don't think. The sun is making a decile to Pluto. Sun is 36 degrees from Pluto. The sun might represent another person. And so with sun decile Pluto, someone wants to be taken seriously. They want to be noticed. And it might appear that someone is deliberately trying to do something to cause a stir. Whether or not that's a good thing or a bad thing, kind of depends on your perspective. I think that from that other person's perspective, they are doing the right thing, probably. And someone maybe does want your attention. And maybe more than that, they want to change things. So it's not just you that are the agent of change. Someone else could be trying to engineer a change as well. And the sooner you're aware of this, the better. And so this is going to be relevant if you are spending a lot of time with other people, if there are important people, significant people in your life over the course of the next day or two. So what kind of change do people want? Maybe it's a time to be talking about change, not just talking about the changes that you want, but the changes that other people want. And you might be surprised, but the more honesty there is, I think the better for everyone. Pisces. It's not necessarily such a different day than yesterday. Okay, we don't have a moon in Scorpio at all, so that is one difference. There's no possibilities. We had a grand trine involving moon in Scorpio, Jupiter in Cancer, Saturn in Pisces. We had that quite recently, but now that the moon is in Sagittarius, we're not dealing with grand trines anymore. We're talking about 4 planets in Sagittarius, 4 planets in a mutable sign, and we've got the build up to a new moon. Because the sun and the moon are in the same sign. And I think that this build-up in Sagittarius, is pretty motivating. I think I said that yesterday. It is about what you want to do, what matters to you. And it's all starting to become clear. You realize that you've perhaps achieved a certain amount. After all, it is the time just before a new moon. You're thinking about what you've achieved in the past, and you're also thinking about, well, what next? What is the next step? You've gone as far as you can in one direction, with one approach. Now you've got to think about a new approach, and it's all part of the same thing. It's not like you've had a big failure and you have to try something else. No, it's all part of the same movement. And I think that with this new moon coming up, with these 4 planets in Sagittarius, I think Pisces, it is a time when you can very much align yourself and take on board everything that you are, everything you've got, all your many and various abilities, because sometimes Pisces, you can disregard what you can disregard your own talents. You can regard them as being irrelevant, not worth bothering with, but it's all worth bothering with. 4 planets in Sagittarius. Sagittarius is a sign which is about bringing everything together, and Pisces, I think that you can bring everything together, and you can start to contemplate what it is that you want. And don't worry about the seasonal slowdown. Maybe other people are slowing down, but Pisces, I don't think you should slow down, because I think that at the moment, there really is a lot that you can get together. So give it your best shot. Really try, and I think you just know where it should be going, where it should all be heading. So I think that you'd really need to make the most of what's going on astrologically. So those are my forecasts for the 12 signs, and now it's time to look at things from the viewpoint of the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Thursday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 9, which is the taming power of the small. And this hexagram is really asking us to be quite modest and reasonable, and to be restrained. We can't expect to achieve everything. We might have lots of ideas, lots of ambitions, all sorts of things we want to do, but we've got to be realistic. If we try to do everything at once, we're probably not going to be especially successful. And even if we're just trying to do one thing and it's really important to us, are we really going to be able to get it together? Because the taming power of the small is asking us to be realistic and not to take on too much. We could waste a lot of time. We've got, maybe it's about having a surplus of energy, and we waste a lot of time. We do this and we do that, and we never get anywhere. It's one of those hexagrams that talks about, dense clouds, no rain. The clouds might be dense. It might seem as if something is going to happen, but I don't think it necessarily is going to happen. And the bottom line moves. And, with the bottom line moving, it's saying that we have an opportunity to return. It seems that maybe we've got off the beaten path. We got distracted. We went too far. We were perhaps over ambitious. We overcommitted ourselves. We attempted to do something that really we couldn't possibly achieve, at least in a short term. With that bottom line moving, okay, we've gone as far as we can. Let's get back on the path. Let's start again. Let's not get distracted. Let's not be in a hurry. Let's not be over ambitious. And so there's a sort of a gentle pull back to the straight and narrow with the bottom line. And I know that sounds boring, but it is the taming power of the small. We really shouldn't take on too much. And then, because of that bottom line moving, we move to a second hexagram. And with the bottom line moving, that means we've got 2 trigrams repeating. So we move to hexagram number 57, which is the gentle, and this is associated with the wind, wind over the wind. And the wind is moving forward. It's trying to get to the bottom of things. And perhaps we're thinking about why things aren't going as quickly as they would like them to. Some of us might feel impatient. Now, it may be that it's just the fact that it's the end of the year, things are slowing down, it's difficult to get things together, maybe as simple as that, but it might be something else. And the gentle, representing the wind, it blows everywhere, it gets through every sort of nook and cranny, and it's looking for something. It's looking for the root of something, the root cause. And so perhaps we have a chance to understand why things might have been slow, maybe why we weren't particularly successful in the very short term, in the recent past. We get an impression, and if we understand why things might be slow, why we might not have been able to reach our full potential recently, then I think that would just make things so much easier. And it's happening, just around the time of a new moon, just before a new moon. And so with this new moon in late Sagittarius, we can perhaps relaunch ourselves. Maybe we will have the opportunity to not have to be tamed by the small. We can instead have big ambitions, big ideas. Mustn't make them too big. We've got to be reasonable. We've got to be restrained up to a point. But then, we can start to realign ourselves and perhaps start to think big, but not too big. So that's the I Ching. And now I just want to have a look at some charts, relating to Donald Trump and Venezuela, and things are obviously, going on in really unfolding in that part of the world. So let's start off with Donald Trump's horoscope, just to remind ourselves, where we're going with the thing. So here is. Let's start with Donald Trump's chart. So here he is. So Donald Trump, just a reminder, he has got Taurus midheaven. his midheaven at 24, 22 Taurus. So it's worth thinking about what Uranus is doing. I mean, Trump wants to have an influence everywhere, and of course he moves from place to place to place, and he gets interested in one thing and then he gets bored and then he moves on to something else, and in the process he causes shockwaves. I won't say that he's causing damage. I'm trying to be neutral here. I'm not giving any particular opinion on Donald Trump. But if we look at what's happening, for example, to him today, approximately today, so what kind of transits has he got? Uranus is going retrograde, and Uranus is, as it goes retrograde, will move closer and closer to his midheaven. I mean, he had Uranus on his midheaven in 2024 in the run-up to his re-election, and it's still there. Now Uranus does not go all the way back to his midheaven. I think it goes stationary direct. I think is it in January at around 27, 28? Uranus goes. I think it's 27, 28 that Uranus goes direct at. So 27, 28. It does go direct 3 degrees from his midheaven. But I mean, I think that's close enough. And I think while Uranus has been on his midheaven, that has to an extent been really stirring him up in many different ways. And additionally, he's had we've had a lot of planets in Sagittarius, and maybe those planets in Sagittarius have been sort of activating, well, they've been activating his moon. I mean, he has Trump has the moon at 21 Sagittarius. He's got his south node in Sagittarius, and I think Trump with his moon conjunct south node. I mean, perhaps a problem with the moon conjunct south node is that moon in Sagittarius, it can act quickly. It's moon in Sagittarius. It doesn't necessarily think too much, and so moon in Sagittarius, big, bold statements which haven't been thought through, which could be damaging. And so maybe with the moon conjunct south node, and having all these planets in the same sign as the moon and the south node has really been stirring things up. Especially as he's got a full moon. I mean, he's got the moon in Sagittarius, opposition the sun in Gemini. So that axis. He seems to swing from one thing to another. I mean, particularly if you look at his approach to Ukraine. I mean, one moment, condemning Zelensky, saying he's going to wash his hands of Ukraine. The next moment, condemning Putin and threatening Putin and all of this kind of stuff. Sometimes doing both, but he's just swinging one way to another. And of course, with Trump, it's often said that he's influenced by the last person he talked to, and I think he really is quite a full moon person, and I think certainly with his foreign policy initiatives, I really do think that we have absolutely seen this full moon in action, just not being able to stay in one place. Particularly, it's the mutable full moon, just swinging one way and another all the time, and so. As far as Venezuela is concerned, why would Venezuela be of any interest to him? Well, it might be the case that he is tuning into the collective. A lot of people who can't stand Trump, who suffer from maybe Trump derangement syndrome, perhaps they're just focusing too much on him as an individual, him as a human being. But when you're a president, you're not a human being anymore. I mean, okay, he's got a side of his personality, he's got a family, he is a human, but as president, he's not really human. Presidents aren't, prime ministers aren't, whether it's Trump or Keir Starmer or Macron, they are instruments of the cosmos, And so I think blaming Trump for what's going on in America. I mean, you might think what's going on in America is great, but whether you blame him or think he's wonderful, it's not really his responsibility. You're just seeing the universe in action, and just through Trump, because this is the case. The more power you have, the less autonomy that you have. The more you're just an instrument rather than a human being with choices. And perhaps this is why Trump had to be president. He's there for a reason. And with Trump, he has Mars rising, and with Mars rising, anyone with Mars rising, or I've got Mars rising. I don't think my Mars is as prominent as Trump's Mars. With Mars rising, one tends to sort of assume a conflict, always a conflict. And certainly that is the case with Trump. And then you have to think, well, what parts of the Earth is Mars rising? Well, Mars rising was rising where he was born. Mars was also rising at the same time for a great swathe of the Americas. So if we do an astrocartography for Trump, let's just hold on. Let's just. So if we hold on, where's he gone? I've lost him. Let me just do an astrocartography for Trump. Sorry. Okay, so there's Trump's chart. So if we do an astromap for Trump, so let's start by looking at the astromap for the world. So I'm interested in Trump's Mars rising. All the places on Earth where Mars was rising, and one of those places was New York. But it goes through Canada, goes through the eastern United States, goes into the Caribbean, and it cuts down through Venezuela and into Buenos Aires. So that Mars rising goes right through South America. And if we look at this chart, if we set that chart, if we set the map for Venezuela, so if we look at if we do the astromap for Venezuela, there's Venezuela. Now that's not what I was looking for. That's got just too many lines. That is, sorry, one moment, let's start again. Okay, we want to have a basic map. There we are. Sorry about that. So there is Venezuela, and there is all the places where Mars was exactly rising when he was. So when Donald Trump was born in 1946, Mars was rising in Venezuela. That's the precise line, and Caracas is here. So Caracas was very close to this line when he was born, to this Mars line. So there's perhaps something about Trump which sort of unexpectedly is stirring things up in South America, and we're already seeing it with Venezuela. And indeed, if we relocate Trump's chart to Venezuela, let's hold on. Let's just do this. There's the relocation. So we're relocating Trump's chart to Caracas, and well, we see what he has in his chart when he was born in New York. Leo rising, Mars, so there's Mars rising as it was in New York, where he was born in New York. So it's just another place where he has his influence. where Mars rising, and he's potentially going to war with Venezuela, and this going back to Trump and thinking, oh well, Trump is just an individual. He's just a human being. He's not. As president, he's just representing the way the world develops, the way the collective works. Something's perhaps going on in South America and America's relationship to South America. Trump. If it wasn't Trump, it would be somewhere else, someone else. And one thinks of Trump as being associated with the Monroe Doctrine. So the Monroe Doctrine. I'm not a great expert on American history, but as far as I understand it, the Monroe Doctrine was saying that the United States, basically wants European colonial powers to stay out of their area. I mean, that's a simplification. But the Monroe Doctrine relates to the Western Hemisphere, and it's kind of developed, and so it's certainly developed by the time of Nixon and Kissinger. You can see what they were doing, the way they were doing whatever they can to prevent communists, as they saw it, or socialists, to have an influence in South America. They would support the dirty wars in Argentina and Chile in the 70s. You have because of the overthrow of Allende and all sorts of stuff going on in Central America. So so that is the Monroe Doctrine. You want to keep foreign powers out of the Americas, and you take it to the next level, and you're saying, well, it's America's sphere of interest. And here, by the way, is the chart for the Monroe Doctrine. It wasn't called the Monroe Doctrine at the time, but it's sort of December the 2nd, 1823, when President Monroe made this speech. Again, it wasn't called the Monroe Doctrine when he made it, but it became known as the Monroe Doctrine. And new moon in Sagittarius. It's kind of interesting that just as Trump is gearing up with Venezuela, has made this blockade of Venezuela, you've got the beginnings of a new moon in Sagittarius. The Monroe Doctrine was articulated on December the 2nd, 1823. That new moon in Sagittarius was right on America's ascendant. Just as a reminder, here's the USA's chart, got an ascendant of 1221 Sagittarius. So the Monroe Doctrine had there was a new moon at around nine Sagittarius, so pretty close to the United States' ascendant. So it's kind of got a situation where it's resonating somewhat with. With Monroe Doctrine is resonating with what Trump is doing in Venezuela. So maybe things are starting to happen. Now, as far as Venezuela is concerned, we've already seen that in Caracas, at the time of Trump's birth, Mars was rising. That Mars line goes right the way through the Americas in Trump's chart. So with Venezuela, I mean, we know that Venezuela is now really at the center of things. I mean, here's the full moon that took place on December the 4th. So that was just under a fortnight ago. This full moon, again, set for Caracas, has Saturn on the midheaven, and now the news at the moment is of the sun Saturn. The news at the moment is of this blockade of Venezuela. Blockade, Sun square Saturn. That's Sun square Saturn seems to fit a blockade. C blockade when the Sun is moving towards a square of Neptune. We've just had Mars square Neptune. So this Sun square Neptune is the sun square the sun square Saturn. Well, it's picking up on the full moon. So Saturn was right on the midheaven, set for if you set the full moon for Caracas. So that's really saying something perhaps about the Venezuelan president and how he's trying to deal with the thing, the Venezuelan government, and just shows how much pressure they're under. And yeah, the Mars is moving to a square of Saturn. And then there is Venezuela itself. There are a number of charts for Venezuela, but I think that Venezuela declared its independence in 1811. It didn't get its independence in 1811, but very often that's the case, that a country declares its independence before it gets it. The United States, for example, in 1776, it was ruled by the British, or the Irish in 1916 with the Easter Rising. Still, you take the Easter Rising chart as the chart for Ireland, even though at the time Ireland was completely controlled by the British. So here is the horoscope of Venezuela for its declaration of independence. And now, of course, its independence is being threatened again with this sort of a blockade by this blockade by America, by the United States. And Venezuela has Mercury at sort of 24 degrees Gemini, opposition Saturn. So you've got Saturn right now pretty close to the square of Venezuela's Mercury. Plus, you've got Sun. You've just had Sun square Saturn. So certainly the Mercury of Venezuela is being hit, and we need to consider also what Uranus is doing. So one feature of Venezuela, which really stands out, is Venezuela has Mars rising when it. This is apparently at the time. Apparently, independence was declared at 3 p.m, and so at that time, assuming that is correct, Mars was rising in Venezuela. So that's a good signature of a country declaring its independence. But now what's happening is that Uranus is starting to cross the descendant of Venezuela. It doesn't get there. Uranus will go stationary, I think, beginning of next year, I think at around 27 Taurus. So within a degree of Venezuela's descendant. And we don't know quite for sure what the time of the declaration was. So Venezuela certainly has Uranus on its descendant, and Uranus transiting Uranus on its descendant, and transiting Uranus will be opposition Venezuela's Mars. So it's not just now. So the next couple of months, could be quite difficult for Venezuela. And you've got Venezuela and Trump. How do Venezuela and Trump get on with each other? So if we look at here's Venezuela's chart, and if we compare Trump and we'll put Trump in a wheel, and we'll put Venezuela on the outer wheel. It's not going to work. Let's start again. So that's another Venezuela chart. That's an 1830 chart for Venezuela. I want to focus on the 1811 chart for Venezuela. So here's the 1811 chart, and comparing Donald Trump and the 1811 chart. Okay, there we go. So here we got Trump in the center wheel, and we have got Venezuela on the outer wheel. And so Venezuela's Mars is square Trump's Mars. That's the first thing to point out. So you can see that Mars square Mars, that does perhaps indicate some degree of conflict. Additionally, Venezuela's Jupiter is at 20 degrees Gemini. So Venezuela's Jupiter at 20 degrees Gemini is conjunct Trump's North Node at also at 20 degrees Gemini. And so regardless of what you think about what Trump is doing in Venezuela, at some level you could say that he really couldn't help himself. Maybe he was just attracted to Venezuela because his Jupiter, sorry, let's say it again. Trump's North Node is where he should be going, North Node in Gemini. So his North Node in Gemini hits Venezuela's Jupiter, and it's pretty close to Venezuela's Venus and Mercury. So maybe you could argue that this is Trump's destiny to be messing around with Venezuela. Does that mean that he's necessarily going to be successful? No. Now, Venezuela came into being in 1811 at the time of a Jupiter-Saturn opposition. And so Venezuela has its Jupiter at 21 Gemini, its Saturn at 22 Sagittarius. Now, that Jupiter-Saturn opposition is right on Trump's full moon. So Venezuela's Saturn is on his moon in Sagittarius. Now, that might be potentially a bad omen for Trump. Should he really, really get involved with Venezuela? Is it really going to help him? And I think there might be an indication here, with Venezuela's Saturn on his moon, that it might not be a good idea. And remember, the moon is the people. The moon is his popularity. So that link up between his full moon and a Jupiter-Saturn opposition at the time of Venezuela declaring his independence may be something that Trump needs to think about, and it could potentially backfire. And we'll have to see how it develops. And I will be looking at these charts again. I also want to look at Maduro's chart, but I don't have a time of birth for Maduro, but I'll look at Maduro's chart pretty soon. So anyway, those are a few thoughts on Trump and Venezuela. I think there's something quite fated about it, with the fact that Trump's Mars goes through the Americas, and that sort of links in a way to the Monroe Doctrine, and that the Monroe Doctrine was sort of pulling on Trump to perhaps to redefine it. But I think that the link up between Trump and the chart of Venezuela is potentially a bother, and I think that Venezuela's Saturn on Trump's moon, he needs to be careful about how far he gets involved, because it might not quite work to plan. So anyway, that's all I'm going to say about Venezuela. So thank you very much for watching this video. If you enjoyed this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. If you want to buy me a coffee, there's a link in the description, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.